Good afternoon, everyone. I started looking into the strange architecture in Columbus, Ohio in a couple videos prior. Ended up finding a map from 1886 of this city, zooming in on the massive megapixel. What do I find? A castle, sort of. Turned out to be Starling Medical Center, 1849, if you can believe this type of construction. Morphed into this without the top architecture on it. Jumping into the State House of Ohio, notice all the cathedrals around there. Lincoln's funeral passes by, front and center. What type of architecture is this when settlement of the day was two-story wood buildings? And of course, you'd be building churches with Greek columns. Perhaps there's a cycle of destruction and previous civilizations are refound again. Magnetic field of these four gas giants going to connect in 2024. When you see the magnetic fields combining into one larger magnetic field, we might start to see something like this as the sun and the four gas giants squeeze the earth, oozing mud from the crust. Because architecture and artwork like this, thrown away after a single year, doesn't really make sense unless you're trying to hide the past. In this day and age, it's so important to keep your body functioning at optimal performance. And collagen may be the closest thing we get to a real fountain of youth. After all, collagen is the most abundant protein in your body and essentially the glue that holds it all together. When you're middle-aged, you're only producing half of the collagen that you did in your youth. My focus is about digestive health because the change in our diets from foods being unavailable, moving to seasonal availability of foods, and the entire spectrum of availability of foods changing. There's so much more to talk about with the benefits of collagen. You can visit healthwithadapt2030.com to learn more. The link's in the description box below. And starting off here in all places, Columbus, Ohio, not Italy. And one thing when I did the previous video was looking at the buildings in the back of this most exquisite stone-carved edifice. What we see in the front is what was left prior. What we see in the back is the children's scratchings of the 1800s and early 1900s that we put in our society. Things made of wood, tin roofs, and that was progress. And during that time doing research, I stumbled across this map here of 1886. High resolution, so I decided to blow it up and let's take a look through the map. First thing you're going to find is an enormous amount of cathedrals in Columbus, which for me, I understand divinity and the church at that time building to come here to worship the Creator through us, understood with the use of funds. But when we start to see what looks like Greek Parthenon as the church of the day, this for me makes no sense unless you're trying to combine some type of paganism, sun worship, and then on top, we're going to put what we know as churches here in the United States in the mid-1800s. You got to realize 1810 was the end of the Dalton minimum. This is a grand solar minimum. Now, were there electromagnetic effects from our sun that caused some sort of reset from the previous society at that time? Because there's a huge disconnect from, say, early to mid-1800s until what we get into the early 1900s in terms of architecture. Because even if we come into 1864, this here, Columbus, Ohio, is the epitome of sawmills, manufacturing, banking. Yet we find giant cathedrals like this, supposedly in the 1890s, but we don't see any construction diagrams. There's not a talk about construction dates. It's just commissioned at a certain time. When we look at this, that's straight out of Europe. Commissioned in a certain 1870 date, but no construction images, never talked about construction. It was as it was. Methodist Church pops out of nowhere. What is this grandeur in such a small amount of capital city at that time comparatively to these gigantic structures stretching hundreds of feet into the air? And then we take a look at what was the state building with all the cathedrals surrounding it. This was countryside, farms. And you have these massive out-of-place buildings and structures right next to two-story wood buildings, and we're supposed to believe that these are all at the same time. Now, looking at Abraham Lincoln's funeral, as they did the progression from Illinois to Ohio up to New York, the grandeur that we see in the Capitol here, these buildings are something very, very different from buildings of the day built in the 1860s. These, in my own opinion, are a remnant of something else. And then when we look at this specific, I would say, salutation to the previous builders, why is this a standalone edifice by itself? Did they not see the other cathedrals around? Because looking into deeper some of the structures at the time in Columbus, they show the State House with the cathedrals in the background. I don't see any of the cathedral spires, anything in that lithograph with the funeral car. Was that missed by the artisans at the time? Because put it in perspective, the image you're seeing here was the society of the day. 2 to 3 floored wooden structures, mud streets, and then this gigantic marble construction out of nowhere. We've been told that this is the building technique, but we can't even replicate that today. When's the last time you saw something of that magnitude being built today? Sure, they can talk about it's too expensive, but the craftsmanship is not there. And why has it never been replicated since that point? Do you ever see these types of buildings around our planet anymore? No. Do people have the money to build them? Yes. So jumping back into the map, does this building that you see here look like it fits into the rest of the landscape? And the map was 1886. Lithograph here that you see, 1848, 1849, supposedly. Starling Medical College, St. Francis Hospital. Now notice at the top all the spires with the arrow termination points. Supposedly commissioned 1849, but again, from that point forward, there's nothing of talk of construction. You don't get any construction diagrams, updates on construction, but 138 feet, that's a 13-floor building. And the entire neighborhood, as far as you can see, is just 2 to 3 floored wooden structures, and this is supposed to be a normal thing. Where was the workforce employed with this? And as we progress in time, you start to see the spires suddenly disappear off the top. Sure, they are on the left there, but what happened to everything else that was on the apex of this building? Chimney's gone, spire's gone, but this frontal view here almost looks as if it's abandoned. No people in front. This is the same thing that we see routinely with these older images. There's never anybody on the streets. Left side, you'll see the spires that are still there, but on the right side, what happened? In the older images, they're there, but they're gone suddenly. Antenna, interestingly, right off the, what would that be, a guard tower from a castle? So far out of place. Who would even design this? And coming out of the settlements right in the 1810s and 20s, you're going from a log cabin to this in 20 years. For me, that's a little stretch in the development in the United States. And because that was a hospital, St. Francis Hospital, you think that moving forward in time, the hospitals would have been more ornate, larger, more well-developed, different engineering, even better than the previous hospitals. But in 1890, this is all they could come up with? Really? And another really would be 1904. Supposedly carved from a single piece of stone, and you can see the people under there. That statue is at least 50 feet tall, supposedly carved for a one single year event and then destroyed afterward. But what about the building on top? Look at the carving work on this. Supposedly so easy to make in 1904, but we can't replicate it and then just destroy it all after this World's Fair. Tear it down, it wasn't good enough. Don't save the buildings, although they're made of solid marble, solid stone, weren't good enough for the day. Just tear them down, had to be destroyed. Or is there something else going on here? Because as we look out on this cycle to different varying degrees of the gas giants lining up in a single quadrant of the solar system, although this 2024 October alignment is the same as 79 AD, very different. We'll find this same alignment to a varying degree in the early 1800s, off a few degrees in the 1600s, in the 1200s, just like the conjunction that we've seen with Jupiter and Saturn, the same era. Does this have a magnetic effect on our planet? See, this is what might cause a slight crack in the Earth's crust, allowing mud and water to ooze and cover the surface of our planet from anywhere from 5 to 30, 40 feet deep, because the way these are going to create that perfect square. These magnetic fields are going to join each other, and they are in turn going to create their own magnetic field as one magnetic field. And then we have the sun, but our Earth is in the center of it. We're going to be pulled from two sides, slightly more to the outer gas giants. But even if you rift the crust 50 to 100 feet in millions of different places, you're going to have an enormous amount of liquefaction happening. Also, electromagnetic effects are going to be pronounced and seen across the planet. How much do we really know of what happened in 1810? How much do we really know what happened in 1640, 1228, 79 AD? What really happened at that time in our past, and has it been hidden from us? These are the questions we need to ask, because is there another one of these events inbound right now, 2024, and this is the reason for the reset. You can't save anything anyway. You might as well distract the people while it's going down, let it reset, and start over again under a new set of rules, a new set of history. You might want to start growing some of your own food, learning how to homestead. You could join me on Patreon /Adapt2030. I try to put history and homesteading together in a single package. It takes me an enormous amount of time to do research like this. And I am trying to figure out some of these repeating cycles in history so you can keep your family safe by knowing what's coming in the future. Another mud flood, another global liquefaction event. If you knew it was in October of 2024, how would you prepare right now to get ready for it? This is the information I want to bring you. And I thank you for watching the video. Hope you got something out of it. I'll see you next time. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and let 2021 be your own manifestation of peace and light for the betterment of all of us on this planet. Stay in the light. I'll see you next time.